Thank you, Rhiannon. Members and members of the public, I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who've joined us today. I should perhaps just start off by saying this is the meeting of the Corporate Parenting Subcommittee on the 17th of November 2021, and we are at the multi-function room at Newshire Hall at Alconbury. So welcome to those members of the public and press who may have joined us today and are watching the live stream. You're very welcome, and I hope that you find today's discussion interesting. I should perhaps point out that I am Councillor Anna Bradnam, and I'm the chair of this committee. The council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures, tweet, blog, etc. during the meeting. However, can I ask everyone to turn your mobile phones to silent or vibrate while the meeting is taking place? To help the flow of discussion, I intend to waive the committee procedure rule limiting members' contributions to 5 minutes. However, we have a lot of business to cover, so I'd ask members and officers to make sure that your contribution remains concise and to the point. To manage the discussion, I would also remind you that all questions and responses should be directed through me. I also note that we have an end time in this venue, so we need to be finished promptly before 7 o'clock. There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting, and those of us in the room will have to make our way to the muster point at the front of the building. We're delighted to welcome Kevin Arrowsmith as the chair of the Cambridgeshire Foster Carers Association to the meeting today. So thank you for joining us, Kevin. Kevin is a non-voting observer, but we're very much welcome him joining in with our discussions. Today's meeting theme is education. So can I just ask, on apologies for absence, I'm advised that Councillor Maguire has had to give his apologies. Do we know if he has a substitute, Rashenda?
I think Councillor Hoy was going to attend if she was able, Chair.
We don't have Councillor Hoy with us at the moment, so we note Councillor Maguire's apologies. Declarations. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? No, I can't see any, thank you. I perhaps should just take a roll call of who's here today, because it feels few. So would you like to introduce yourself? So Councillor Hay.
Say something? Yes, I've remembered. I'm Councillor Anne Hay. I represent Chatteris and I've sat on corporate parenting now for 5 years.
Thank you. Councillor Bulat.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Alex Bulat. I represent the Abbey division in Cambridge, and I'm a new councillor, so first year on this committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor Slatter.
I'm Philippa Slatter. I represent Trumpington in Cambridge, and I'm also a new member of this committee.
Okay, and I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam, and I represent Waterbeach division. So, thank you. Right. So, moving on to item 2, the minutes. We're asked to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 14th of July, which is on page 1 of our agenda. Are there any matters of accuracy that anybody wishes to raise about those minutes? I had one, yes, which is simply a typo. On page 4, under item 7, towards the end of it, there's a paragraph that starts to recognise that unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, etc. And it goes on to say, we're often better suited to independent living with contact from colleges. And I wanted to check, was it actually with contact from colleges, or was it with contact with colleagues? It talks about.
I think, Rhiannon, are you able to clarify? I know you did the minutes.
Yeah, that should be contacts with colleagues. It is a typo. and it will be amended.
The only reason I asked it in a querying frame was because these are unaccompanied asylum seeking children who might well be wanting to have contact with colleges, with education. So I wondered if perhaps we could just listen back on the recording and just check what that was, just to make sure we've got it right.
I will do that.
Thank you so much. I think that was all. So were there any other? Right, okay, so if you're happy with that agreement to check the verbal record, perhaps we can agree that that's. Does anybody object to be agreeing those minutes? No. Okay, good. Thank you. So then we move to the action log, and this is on page 9 of our agenda. But can I just remind members in the room that actually we have a printed update on our tables, because the action log that's in our agenda pack is actually out of date, and many of the things that are itemized in the agenda that was sent out have actually been undertaken. So do refer to the action log that we've been issued as an update. Are there any questions on the action log, the revised action log? No? Okay, right. So thank you, members. We'll record that we have noted the action log. Thank you. So moving on to item 3, this is the participation report, which will be introduced by Shalina Chandu, the Quality Assurance Lead, who's joining us remotely. Shalina, members will have already read your report, so you can keep your introduction brief, and that will allow as much time as possible for questions and debate. But Shalina, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Whoops, sorry.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, everyone. I just have a few items from the report to highlight. The first is that we delivered a face-to-face activity at Burwell House alongside a virtual session in the half term in October. And we also premiered the virtual art exhibition this year in the October half term. So members will recall that the Children in Care Council will be using the artwork from that art exhibition to create cards for professionals to use with young people in care, either saying celebrating successes or saying goodbye. Young Recruiters is going very well. We've been recruiting various staff members throughout the period, including a new participation officer who joined us in October. Young people were also involved in foster carer training, so that was for prospective foster carers, and they talked to them about what it means to be an ideal foster carer. And they also spoke about how they can help settle young people into a new place, into their new foster home. Also, our Care Leavers Forum have been very active, delivering their previous project, which was an adventure and team building day. And they're already started work on their next project, which is a performance-based opportunity for children in care and for care leavers. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Shalina. I'm going to start off and I just, a couple of things. I wanted to say thank you very much for the work you did also towards the fun day at Hinchingbrook House, which was great fun. And I'm impressed, as always, by the quality of the work that went into the art exhibition. I was particularly impressed by the some of the artwork. I loved the sunflower with live snails crawling across it, which was delightful. And sunrise magic, just delightful pieces of artwork. And I just did wonder whether you've ever thought about making some of those available as perhaps cards that members might use and we could buy. I don't know, it was just a thought that some of them are such lovely artworks. I'm sure people might want to use them as Christmas cards or cards to send out. But anyway, just a thought, maybe a bit too commercial, but just a thought there. And the other one I wanted to ask was, I noticed at 1.4 in your report, you've said we successfully recruited to the vacant participation officer role, and the new team member joined us in mid-October. And I just wondered who that was or is.
Yes, her name is Malika George, and she joined us on the 18th of October. She's done previous work in Kensington and so brings a lot of experience with her.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Shalina. Do any other members have any questions? Councillor Slatter.
Yes, thank you for your report. A useful reminder, even the things we knew about it, it is so good to see them all collected together and where the public can read about them as well. Just a question and then a suggestion. 3.7 mentions the part being played by young recruiters in interview panels. And it may well be that some members of the public seeing that might have a slightly discordant image of just how would that work, and the style of the interview and the sort of contributions and questions asked. I would be really interested in just a little bit of background on that, please. I'll make my suggestion later. Perhaps you could do the interview bit first.
Sure. So each young person who's interested in recruiting with us goes through training. We talk about job roles, we talk about how interviews occur, and then we offer any teams who want to interview 2 ways of having young people involved. So one is having a young person on the interviewing panel with them. That involves the young person creating their own questions, asking those questions alongside the other questions from managers, and scoring the candidate like you would in a normal interview. The other option is to have a young person's panel. That's better for children who are a bit younger, who don't want to be sitting on an interview panel in a very formal way. And we've had groups of up to 8 young people on these panels. So our participation officer, who was recruited in October, or joined us in October, we did the interviews at the end of July. And we had, because it was summer holidays, a great time to have children who were school age join. So we had 8 young people sitting together. She came in, as did other candidates, and we were given a little test. They had to do an icebreaker activity, and they also wrote all of their comments about her, all of their observations after she left the room. They did the scoring, and then we used that scoring as a contributing factor to the final decision. So they had equal weighting, in fact, to the interview panel.
Thank you. That's really interesting, and sounds like such a good idea. The other thing was just a suggestion in 310. I've come across through, because I'm a member of the Fire Authority. I take it you've heard of the fire break scheme, have you?
Yeah.
Ah, great. Well, it's worth my chipping in then, because this is something put on by the Fire and Rescue Service, and they could soon give you all the background you need. Some of it's on the website. It's called Fire Break, and they're particularly useful for children, the care leavers, who will be given tremendous confidence and inspiration, really, by taking part in these. I know that the schools where they've been used and the places where they've been taken advantage of have been immensely impressed by what it can do to help the young people. So perhaps you'd like to look into that, or come back to me and I can explain it.
Yes, we'll look into it, and actually it's quite timely. We have a newsletter going out in December for care leavers, so we can include information in that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed the young inspectors are going to be visiting all the supervised contact centres. Can you tell us how many there are, and when we could expect their report to be finalised, and will that report be coming back to this committee so that we can see what their recommendations are?
Okay, so we expect to have a report in around January time. They're doing some visits in December. Some are virtual visits because of COVID and other reasons they couldn't, and even just geographical reasons, they couldn't travel to all of them. So one of our officers went and did like a virtual tour, which they'll show them. Historically, our young inspectors reports haven't come here to this forum, but perhaps I can discuss with Nicola whether that would be something we would need to do.
I think it would be a very good idea, because we as corporate parents need to be aware of any improvements that can be made in the experience of children in care. And this is quite important, where they meet with family members in a supervised way. Can I also put forward a second question? Obviously, there's several things going on where children in care are been trained, such as the Young Recruiters Group and the Young Inspectors Group. Now, obviously, the experience they gain in taking part in these type of things, is there any record kept per child in care that they can then hold on to and take forward when they go for job interviews to show what experience they've had in these areas?
Yes, absolutely. It's really important to us that the work we do empowers and makes a difference to young people and tells them about the skills they're developing as they're doing the work. So we have a system of certificates and thank you letters, as well as recognition vouchers every time a young person is involved in one of these activities. So for example, the recruitment certificate will list all of the skills that young person has demonstrated. We also have one for the training, and we have one for actually delivering the recruitment, being on the panel. And we also have a letter in which we tell them about their skills again. They can take this as part of their record if they were going to a job or they were using it to get some work experience. And it also gives them feedback from the recruiting manager. And we also give them feedback on actually who was then given the role and whether they accepted or not. So with foster carer training, for example, again, they all received certificates detailing the skills that they had demonstrated and a thank you letter alongside their vouchers.
Thank you. So can we take it as an action point to consider that young inspector's report? Nicola, would you like to?
So what I was just going to suggest, Councillor Hay, is actually perhaps a report on the supervised contact service itself, when we can incorporate what the young inspectors have said. That's actually Ricky's area of work, but I think it is actually something we haven't got as a separate report for the committee, this forward plan. So we're very happy to take that away and produce a report.
I agree. I think that's a very good idea. So thank you. I want to say thank you to Shalina and the participation team, because you facilitated such a range of activities which have obviously been designed to engage as many young people as possible in our care. So different things for different young people. So congratulations, and thank you very much indeed. Okay. So, right. So we're asked to note that report, and I think we've raised any queries with the lead officers. So we'll move on to item 5 then. So this is a report from the Cambridgeshire Foster Carers Association. First of all, I'll go to Ricky Cooper, who's the Fostering Regional Adoption and Specialist Young People Service lead, and then I think the report is going to be brought to us by Fiona van den Hout, the Head of Service for Fostering, and Kevin Arrowsmith, who's Chair. So Ricky, do you want to start off?
Of course, thank you very much, Chair. So I'm not going to say a great deal because you've eloquently introduced both Kevin and Fiona, who are going to present the report on behalf of the Foster Care Association. So the report is a joint venture between the service and the Foster Care Association in relation to strengthening our relationship with our foster carers, obviously so that we can inform our service based on their needs and looking to how we can improve that. So Fiona and Kevin are going to present the report together. So on that basis, I'll hand over to Kevin and Fiona.
Thank you, Ricky, and apologies, my internet is bouncing a bit today, so I'm sure, Kevin, if I break up, you'll jump in, won't you?
Yeah.
Thank you. So obviously the report is fairly long, and I know there's a lot of business today, so just to highlight specifically around this subcommittee theme of education, that we wanted to remind subcommittee members that there was a survey conducted of foster carers back in November 2020, which was supported by the CFCA. And following that, the CFCA has been invited to attend the Virtual School Management Board, and Kevin, as chair of the FCA, attends the management board. And the CFCA has also been involved in the audits held by the virtual school around the personal education plans for children, which has supported the Virtual Schools Improvement Drive. The virtual school has also led a foster carer workshops, and I'm really pleased to report that there have been developments within the welfare call system, which is the recording system used by the virtual school, which will enable foster carers direct access to current and historical PEPs, and testing will be undertaken shortly. And the CFCA also participated in a pupil voice working group with the virtual school. As you know, and we discussed at the last subcommittee meeting, the service has released a refreshed foster carer training brochure in July, and we're currently developing our 2020-2023 foster carer training programme, and we're doing that alongside foster carers as well as other departments within children's services. I also wanted to note that the virtual school have invited supervising social workers to one of their fostering households to a pupil voice conference in March 2022, and Kevin, as chair of the FCA, will also be attending. I did also want to note that there have been foster carers have raised, and this was raised in Kevin's CFCA report as well, experienced of challenges with transport to school arrangements in September, and this has been discussed with the corporate parenting service, and arrangements will be well organised in advance for September 2022. Kevin, can I ask you, is there anything else you would like to raise in that section?
No, I think that covers everything in the education section. Yeah, it's been, I suppose only to say it's been really positive, the relationship that we've now built with the virtual school, and I'm really hopeful that we can, as an association, and just, even generally for foster carers, that we can work closely with other departments as well and other services, virtual school being one of them. So it's been really positive, and I think it's been useful for both sides. So I think Claire Hyams will probably talk more about that in her section, but I do think it's been really good. So that whole year is kind of, been good. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I also wanted to, obviously you've read the whole report, but I wanted to drop down into the foster carer survey again, because this aligns with the theme on education. And at the last subcommittee, we agreed to do a foster carers told us and the fostering service responded. So I hope that I have reflected how the foster carer voice has influenced the development programmes within the service on a number of areas that were raised.
Thank you. Could I, while you're on, I just wanted to ask a couple of things. One is, I wanted to come back to section 2.3 of your report, and I'm mindful it touches on really quite a sensitive issue when foster carers need more support when subject to allegations. And I just wanted to, because what I can absolutely appreciate, this is a very difficult time when you need to establish what's going on. I just wanted to check whether foster carers are put on a retainer while any allegations are being investigated, because clearly they might have not just one foster child, but more than one. So if we don't support them as foster carers while investigations are ongoing, we might put at risk their support for another of our children in care. So could we understand what's going on there?
Yes, there is a retainer paid to foster carers whilst they're subject to allegations, Councillor Bradnam. And some investigations, children remain, depending on the severity and the content of the allegation, of course, but some foster carers remain caring for the children during the investigation, and obviously that's an agreement with the children's social worker.
Thank you, that's reassuring. And the other one I wanted to check about was at the end of, well, it's page 22 on our agenda. There was a request from the foster carers, wanted us to provide more training that's face-to-face rather than e-learning. I just wondered whether the actions taken were sufficient to fulfill the need. I mean, whether the training that was provided was what people wanted and whether they were able to access it. And I know some people found actually training online easier to do because they didn't have to go anywhere else. So I wonder if you could just give it a bit of background around that, please.
Yes, no, I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Bradnam. I think some foster carers have found virtual training much more accessible, and they can fit training around all the other chores that they have and caring tasks that they have, and certainly being able to access training in the evenings and weekends, which is online, so e-learning training. We have just held our first Skills to Foster as a hybrid model. So some of the course was face-to-face and some of the course was virtual. And I think what we recognise as a service is that there is some training where carers do need to come together and meet each other, social distancing, of course. But I think it's really what we're hearing from foster carers, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, is that really we're looking for a sort of mixture of e-learning opportunities and face-to-face training. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah, that's right. I think a lot of carers have found that the virtual works really well for them. They've been able to, sort of multitask, if you like, with that. Yeah. And I think depending on the carers, especially for maybe sort of single carers, and especially newer carers that are still sort of trying to fill their way, they have really missed out on the face-to-face contact of just sort of seeing people. I guess that's kind of probably across the board because of the recent situation, but certainly a hybrid model I think is what the general consensus is, so people can choose either way. Interestingly, there was a first aid course that took place which was virtual, and there was lots of comments about it being one of the best first aid courses they'd done. And they didn't do the CPR bit, but in the rest of it was actually so it's quite interesting. So it can be done. So I think it's been a mix. That's good.
I think it's true to say that finding suitable venues is a challenge for us, because we need venues that are large enough to hold face-to-face courses, but we're continuing to investigate that.
Thank you. And the final thing I wanted to ask was that foster carers told us that the TSDS document is too onerous, and I just wondered whether we'd done any work to explore whether that could be made easier to access, or the number of questions, or the length of time it takes to complete. I just wondered whether that's been addressed at all.
So the document we have at the moment is based largely on the fostering network workbook. So we do need to review that, and that's planned for 2022.
Thank you. Right, okay, members, has anybody else got any questions? Councillor Bulat.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about I think it's point 1.5 on the challenges with transport to school arrangements. I was wondering if we could have a bit more background on that, because it said that there are staffing pressures and that arrangements are made for next year. But I was just wondering a bit more background on what is the situation until 2022 and how the situation looks like currently. If there could be a bit more detail on that point, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm very aware that Nicola, I don't know whether this is something you would like to comment on. Their staffing pressures are, I think, shared across most services currently, and certainly during that period within the corporate parenting service. but I think that they are being resolved and recruitment is underway.
Nicola, do you want to respond?
So I think I'm not sure there's a lot more I can add to what Fiona just said. We are conscious. It is quite complicated to make sure that you've got all of the transport arrangements sorted out for children care, particularly if they're moving placements. We have had some staffing issues in recent months, particularly becoming more acute in corporate parenting. We do have some staff planned to start in actually early December, I was about to say next month, but very shortly. So we're hoping that will address the situation. I think, however, that Myra, I can't quite see on the screen, so I'm not quite sure what's happened to Myra, but Myra certainly has been aware of that situation and has been working to try and address it anyway, because obviously it's not good for children not to have proper arrangements, and very frustrating for foster carers, as we know.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter.
Thank you. So I'm glad the chair has raised the issue about support during allegations, and I'm glad that there is financial support. I'm also wondering about emotional and practical stroke legal support. It has been remarked that we provide that sort of support for our social workers, our employees. And I noticed that you do mention the use of mentors, perhaps. So there's two mentor connected questions. I mean, first of all, what sort of who are these people who are being recruited as mentors? And is this something that now it's being introduced will be valuable, not just for new foster carers, but also as sort of during one's whole career as a foster carer, to have somebody to turn to, especially in a time of crisis? I don't know whether Kevin has an experience of that, or the officers can help us. Thank you.
First of all, direct the question to Fiona van den Hout about mentors, and then we'll come to Kevin shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Okay, so we do have a mentorship framework in place, and actually Kevin's one of our mentors, so he could explain the role very eloquently. We are reviewing that framework, and we hope to launch that actually this month. We absolutely, and in discussions with both Kevin and the chair of the Peterborough Foster Carer Committee, recognise the value of linking a mentor with a household who is subject to an allegation, because it is a different relationship. And whilst foster carers are able to access and always advised to access fostering network for sort of the legal advice and advocacy, having a foster carer alongside you is absolutely what foster carers are telling us they need. So we will launch that in hopefully this month. In terms of the mentor programme as well, we are looking to link mentors with foster carers who are in assessment, so that relationship builds from the onset, because I think that would be very valuable for new foster carers when they first become approved as well. Kevin, did you want to say anything about your role as a mentor?
I was going to ask Kevin if he had any comments on any of the items that we've considered. Kevin, do go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I think that the changes in the mentoring scheme, making it more of a role in itself, will be really useful for foster carers. One of the most recent highlights of that is starting the mentoring during the assessment process, as Fiona just said. And I think that what we kind of recognise is I took on a mentee during the later part of the lockdown, and actually it is really isolating, and they really there's a period of time from before assessment till after they've had their full assessment and they've been approved to then having a placement. There's sometimes quite a considerable lapse, and it's a bit of a no man's land. So having a mentor at that time to talk about different strategies, talking about the different placements that they may or may not get, it's a bit of a training opportunity as well. and also getting to know someone before they have that placement. You're aware of what might be that foster carer's triggers and different trigger points for them. So that's definitely, I think, a very, very strong point for the mentorship scheme. The allegation side of things as well is quite newly talked about within the mentoring, and I'm really keen to work more on that. As when Fiona and I spoke, Fiona was talking about some additional training for mentors along that side of things. So I think something for foster carers, especially those that have been fostering for a while and have experience in different areas, something that foster carers are really keen on is to be able to develop themselves, so that, you know, more than just, you know, being a foster carer, so developing within the whole sort of fostering service. And so that's really good to hear that that's being looked at. I think one thing I was going to go back on, just back before I forget, we were talking about the transport. I think the key thing of the transport within the report wasn't so much that foster carers were complaining that it didn't happen. I think what foster carers were trying to say, and it might have been sort of, it might not come through very clearly in the report, was that actually foster carers are really happy to try and help with this. And because of the way the system sometimes works, is that the foster carers can't just ring up transport and say, look, a taxi hasn't arrived, blah, 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 blah. And actually a lot of carers are saying, like, if we had some numbers or we had a little bit more ability to get involved with that, then actually we'd be happy to do it. So I think that's something that I wanted as chair to bring back as a positive, really, that foster carers are willing to help. And obviously sometimes, you know, the foster carers on the phone say, well, the taxi's not here. That could be heard as, oh, you know, one thing, but in fact it could be actually they want to try and help. So that's just something to bear in mind, I think, for the future as well, from a foster care point of view.
Thank you.
Does that answer the questions?
Yes, I think so. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin. That's really helpful. So I can't see. Oh, yeah, sure.
The microphone. The other thing is on 3.3, the growing number of older children with more complex needs. Now, we know that sometimes this quite rightly leads to a placement in a specialist fostering agency or organisation, but your aspiration to have foster carers willing to provide care in-house, but often in an emergency, is clearly a really big ask. I think I'm reminded of conversations I've had with Ricky about housing, you know, in emergencies, various sorts. And I'm wondering whether when we have somebody who's got the right training to receive somebody with complex needs and is ready to do it, have officers ever looked into the relative budget implications of using agencies or paying a retainer to in-house foster carers? Just an exploratory one, doesn't require an answer straight away, Madam Chair.
So I think it's sensible to ask Ricky that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to take that question. It is a complex issue. It's one in which the service is keen to address, not least because we want to be able to offer children and young people foster placements that are local to where they live, but also, as you quite rightly point out, the impact on the council's budget that can have. The service has got a scheme of actions in relation to how we seek to address that, not least by tapping in further to our clinical offer so that we're able to support foster carers, work alongside our fostering support teams in supporting carers to look after young people that have got particular vulnerabilities, the ones that you mentioned. So I don't have the golden answer for you today, but it is something that certainly the service is undertaking as a strategic priority for the very reasons that you outlined and the ones that I mentioned.
Thank you. Right. Okay. So I think we've talked that very thoroughly. Members, I think we're going to have to move a little bit faster as we move forward through the agenda, but thank you very much for really airing the concerns very thoroughly. So thank you very much. So we note the contents of the report. Thank you very much to Kevin and to Fiona van den Hout and to Ricky for bringing that to us. And Kevin, you are most welcome to stay on and continue to contribute to the meeting.
Thank you.
Item 6 is the Virtual School Head Teachers Annual Report, and we have Claire Hjorns joining us remotely to introduce her report. Claire, I hope.
Good evening. So I won't do a very long introduction because I think the information is all contained within the report, but just really to say that obviously the last couple of years we've had to be very responsive in terms of our approach to because of COVID. But alongside that, we really wanted to ensure that we've continued our journey of improvement as a virtual school with these 5 priorities. So we have continued to work on PEPs, and our aim over the 5 years is to ensure that our PEPs are dynamic, live and relevant. We have continued to have a priority around children and young people having increased access to high quality education, which leads to improved outcomes. That children and young people have increased inclusion within education, leading to improved outcomes. That aspirational education is seen by all as a key to enabling children to learn, aspire, thrive and achieve their potential, and that there's a collective responsibility for the education of children in care and previous in care, with all parties feeling empowered within their role, the part they have to play within this. So I hope that comes through in aspects of the report that has been provided for you. As I say, it's the Head Teachers Report is a statutory requirement, as well as coming to yourselves as corporate parents, corporate parenting board. It also goes to our virtual school management board, and it is also entered into the library of evidence and will be what Ofsted look at when they come to gain an understanding of the journey of the virtual school and where we're at.
Thank you, Claire. And can I, at the outset, say thank you very much for such a comprehensive report with such useful graphics as well as narrative about it. And I also particularly wanted to thank you for the glossary, which is extremely useful. And if only more would do that. So a couple of things. No, I'm going to let others ask questions first. If anybody has any questions on the report. No hands up? Oh, Councillor Boulat, do go ahead.
I'll try to be brief because I know we don't want to be here exactly until 7 p.m.
No.
I had a question about the vacancies. I think there's page 6 of the report. It seems there are quite a few vacancies. So I was just wondering how the process is going, and if you can comment on that, to what extent does that affect the service at the moment. And then on page, just one second, 11, I think I had a broader question, I guess, about the unaccompanied asylum seekers, because I note that the out of county placements the percentage is much higher than the average, and I understand this is because usually outside of Cambridgeshire, there are placements that better meet the religious and cultural needs of children. But I was wondering if there are any efforts to actually have more in-county placements and to actually have the provision that matches religious and cultural needs, or whether we're happy to have this higher number of out-of-county placements with the current situation, whether any kind of efforts are made in the other sense of having more kind of in-house placements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boulat. Do you want to take that?
So yes, so because I don't think Claire can answer to the placement issue, but I'll let her speak about the other things. So I think when we talk about out of area, we're usually talking about Peterborough. So we do have a few young people who are unaccompanied asylum seekers who are living quite a long way away, and that's usually because they're much younger, and we have found IFA foster placements which do meet their cultural and often language needs, which is one of the key things when they first come into this country, is actually if they don't speak any English, it's quite challenging. So we try and do that. The vast majority of our young people are between 16 and 18 in this group, and they tend to be placed in some of our specialist providers who have developed a specialism, to be honest, in working with this group of young people, and they tend to be in Peterborough just because of the housing. So they're not very far away. So I think we feel that actually their needs, generally speaking, are actually quite well met. We have very good working relationships with the colleges in Peterborough, which enable them to go in and do their ESOL and things like that. So I think generally it works quite well. If we do have provision in Cambridgeshire, then we use it. But again, we're trying to create communities of people, because it is obviously easier for young people if they have someone else that speaks their language or comes from the same culture. So that's what we try and do. So it's not miles and miles away. Is that right?
Thank you. And if we come back to the question about vacancies, Claire, were you able to answer that? The question was, does the number of vacancies impact the service that we can deliver?
Sorry, apologies that the connection's not brilliant, and I missed the first part. Were you referring to the vacancies within the virtual school team?
Yes, it was looking at the vacancies. Councillor Boulat alerted us to 1.3 on page 6 of the report.
Yeah.
And she noted that there were a number of vacancies, and she asked, is that impacting on the
no. Yeah, so those two vacancies are because from September, the role of the virtual school has there's been an addition to our role. So that is for children who are open to SIN and child protection, children in need. And this is a non-statutory role which was added, as I said, from the 1st of September, and there's some funding that's been associated with that. And that is about us having a strategic leadership role within the local authority to support, because it's what's very apparent is that actually the outcomes for children in need are actually the cohorts of children are not doing as well as they should be doing. So it's about us using the knowledge of the skills and experience that we've got around children in care and being able to use that to promote educational outcomes for children in need. So those two vacancies are new posts that are directly related to that new funding and to that new role, one of which we have appointed to. So our performance assistant is actually started this week, and the advert is live as we speak.
Thank you. And who's the new person who's been appointed?
So the performance assistant is a lady called Louise Cole, and she will be joining us. Well, she joined us from Monday.
Thank you. And sorry, did you say you're recruiting to the other one, the strategic lead?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, okay. I had a couple of questions too, Claire. On page 10 of your report, there's SEND comparison with all children in care, and you've said that the percentage of Cambridgeshire children in care who require special or additional support without an EHCP is currently 27.7%, which is higher than the national percentage. And I wondered, is there consequent national funding to support our children in care with these needs, or is it, what happens about that, given that we seem to have, we know we have children, a greater proportion of children with special educational needs?
Yeah, so I think it's usual for a cohort of children in care to have more special educational needs than a general cohort of children. When you look against, so for SEN support, you're right, for 2020 we had 27.7%, and that compares to the East of England. So children in care across the East of England is at 27%, and our statistical neighbours are at 26%. So we are very, very slightly higher than children in care across the Eastern region and statistical neighbours. So in terms of the funding associated, so for any of our children with special educational needs, they obviously can go through those same processes as any child. So if their needs mean that they would benefit from an education healthcare plan, then that process can be followed through, and the children can access that funding alongside the Pupil Premium Plus funding, which we as a virtual school hold, and will distribute according to the needs of the children and young people. We are having So over this last year, we have started and will continue to work around the cohort of children with special educational needs. So one of the first things that we're doing is that we are making sure on the PEP document now that when on our schools complete the PEP document, they also, if the child has special educational needs, they will upload the documentation relating to their special educational needs so that we can cross-reference it. And that's for a number of reasons. Obviously, we want to make sure that we've got a full overview of the needs of the child. It means that we can make sure that the outcomes that are being set through things like their education healthcare plans marry up with what's being set within the PEP, so that there's not two completely separate processes going on. And it also helps us to be able to look at the funding, because what schools obviously shouldn't be doing is receiving funding for a child through an education healthcare plan and then also requesting pupil premium plus for that same need, because it's double funded. So we want to make sure that any pupil premium plus funding is in addition and is going to meet a different need, or will be used to promote education in a way for a child that isn't already funded through an education healthcare plan for them. You'll see from the report we've also have a virtual school Senko. And one of the things that we are looking to do when we go through and we quality assure the PEPs, we are from this year starting to look at where we feel that the needs identified within the PEP would suggest that the child maybe should be identified as SEN support, or may already be identified as SEN support, but potentially they need to be going to that next step and looking at formalising things through an education healthcare plan. So we'll be looking at the needs identified within the PEP and going back and having conversations with the school to say, we've identified from what you've reported here, these areas of need. Please, can you talk to us a little bit more? Is the school Senko involved? Have any outside agencies been involved? And really looking to tighten that up for our children.
Okay, thank you. Just another couple of things I just wanted to raise, which are just very heartening, and that was the number of children who are going into further education from our children in care cohort. I found that very encouraging at 15.3 in your report. And I just wanted to thank you for doing that. And subsequently, the destinations, we've got post-13 destinations, progression to universities across the county, and that's 60, which is 67.4%, which I think is extremely encouraging. So thank you very much for that. Did any other members have any further things to request or ask? No. Thank you, Claire, very much for your report, and thank you for the detail. It came out in startlingly small print when we printed it out, so I think it's, but there's a lot of information in there and I appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one thing, Kevin Arrowsmith, did you want to raise anything on that since you are listening in?
No, I think I thought it was really comprehensive. Yeah, good read. So good. No, I think it's really well covered. Okay,
thank you very much. Okay, so thanks, members. So we were asked to note the recommendations, just find it, and raise any issues with the note and comment. So I think we've done all of that. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Claire Hjorns. Okay, so item 7 is the health data update for November 2021. Catherine York, the designated nurse for children in care, joins us remotely to present her report. And I'd like to remind members that Catherine joins us today as an officer in one of our key partner organisations. And we're looking at ways that our organisations can work together to improve outcomes for our children and young people in care. So, Catherine, would you like to present your report?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So I'm going to take it that you've read the report, but just pull through a few key things. One of which is just the way I've presented the data this time. I've tried to make it much more clearer so that moving forward we can really unpick where we're going and how improvements are coming along and things. So in terms of the initial health assessment, I've reported for the previous 3 months, and I've totaled it for children that are placed in Cambridgeshire, and then underneath that is children that are placed out. So you can see that we had challenges previously around the initial health assessment performance, which is why I wanted to be absolutely clear about things. So the requirement is for an initial health assessment to be completed within 20 working days of a child or young person coming into care. And for those placed in Cambridgeshire, we have achieved 83% this for that quarter. And health have achieved 89%, an additional one completed within 15 days, which is the amount of time that health receive of that 20 days. So it gives a much clearer overview. So you've got the numbers and percentage. And then directly underneath that in the report, you'd see that I've captured those placed out of area. So we have a total of 14 children placed out of area that needed an initial health assessment in those 3 months. And the data for 6 of those isn't known, but you'll see that for the 8 in the first 2 months, they weren't completed within 20 days. So there's a number of factors around that, and that's why I've captured it differently, because it's not something that the Cambridgeshire Health team have control over. The team requests them of the area provider where the child is placed, and we're sort of in their hands. There's lots of chasing and prompting, and if we know there's going to be difficulties in advance, then there'll be consideration of whether that health assessment could be undertaken virtually. But sometimes it's around foster carer availability, appointment availability for the paediatrician in that area, and sometimes it's about placement move as well. So if a young person is placed somewhere initially as a sort of an emergency and then they're moved, it sort of has an impact and delays those areas. So as I say, the green area is what we achieve in-house, and then the figures at the bottom are the overall, so the out of area and the Cambridge ones combined, which then makes it look that the performance isn't so good at 47%. So that's the initial health assessment. The review health assessments, again, month on month is between 83 and 94%. So that's usually fairly consistent between about 85 and even up to 100% sometimes. But again, if we've got children placed out of area, that often impacts on that performance as well, despite all the chasing and things. And again, consideration is given to virtual assessments and whenever possible, and sometimes, you know, a child would be seen in face-to-face by one of our nurses if they're placed in Peterborough, for example. And then I've captured then the strength and difficulties questionnaire data as well. And again, this is done differently this time because we've been doing some work, or I've been working with the health team around how we report the data. And previously I wasn't assured that the data was accurate. And so with the lead nurse and their information team, we've worked and looked at how we collect that data and then how I can then report it. So I think the key things is that we always measure against the performance of that data, and that can sometimes look as if it's about what the health team are or aren't doing. But this way of reporting is you can see the number that were due, and this is without the exclusions. And then you've got that as a percentage. So what I've found is in the 3 months I've reported on, that the health team sent an SDQ, or emailed it to the foster carers for each child that was due one. And then you've then got the number of completed forms returned by the foster carers, and that as a percentage. So overall for the 3 months, it's a 50% return, which although it doesn't sound really good, is actually an improvement on what we had overall for the previous year, because that was only 27%. So obviously we have to take into consideration the pandemic and how things were managed in that time, and that was a huge shift for the team, but also for carers around receiving everything by email, and that would impact. They were also working differently. They had children at home more. There was lots of issues, lots of pressures on everybody. So the returns were particularly low for the whole of last year. So we have seen some improvements. And so in July, it's commenced in July, the wording of the email that accompanied the SDQ asking for it to be completed was just, we reviewed that and just sort of strengthened it a little bit. But what we're hoping is that over the next 3 months, so we're working through those months now, but certainly, you know, by the end of the next 3 months, we will have a really clear picture of what that's looking like because of the changes back to some sort of normality around practice. But I think there is something around a little bit of work that needs to be done. And once we're a bit clearer about what that performance will look like by, say, the end of November or December, then I'll be able to link in with Fiona, Vanden, and maybe Kevin around how we can work together to sort of improve that. Might be joining in some of the training, getting some support to carers if they identify any issues or problems that you know, prevent them from completing those. The positive is with face-to-face assessments, then there's an opportunity for the questionnaire to be completed at the time. It's not always appropriate, but that has increased the numbers a little bit as well since June when we went back to face-to-face. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Very much appreciate your careful presentation of the data such that we can understand exactly what's going on. So thank you very much indeed. And I'm very encouraged to see that although that number of 50% return doesn't look brilliant at first sight, it's a significant improvement on last year. So thank you very much at that. One of the things I just wanted to check with you is, can you remind us whether when you say, going back to your 3.1.1, the initial health assessment performance data, and you've helpfully separated out the initial health assessments done in-house and out of county. When you say that's out of county, is that with the county council local authority, or is it with health providers, so GPs? Who is actually responsible for chivying that along?
Okay, so our local authority colleagues make the referrals into the Cambridgeshire Health team, and then if they're placed out of county, then the provider in that area undertakes the health assessment. So we have a reciprocal arrangement with Peterborough, so we undertake each other's health assessments without any problem, so that, you know, it's just straightforward. But it's those that are placed in other areas, and depending on, you know, how they're functioning in their teams at the time can impact on our children. So each health team does have a responsibility to treat children placed in their area from another local authority the same as their own children, and we do that for children placed in Cambridgeshire. However, if they're struggling to undertake their own health assessments, then ours children and young people are affected in the same way. But as I say, if as soon as we know there's an issue or a problem, there's lots of chasing goes on, and if it is appropriate, we would see that child or young person virtually. The reason for not seeing all of them virtually is because actually it's really important for the local provider who know the health services in that area to be able to undertake that, so they can make appropriate referrals, because in each area the health provision can be quite different, and how school nurses work, health visitors, speech and language therapy, child development centres. There's a whole range of different things. Certainly the CAMS provision, so mental health provision, is very different from area to area.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Members, Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question on the strength and difficulties questionnaire. Whilst I appreciate 50% is higher than previous years. What I'd like to know is there any follow-up contact with carers who haven't returned forms to fully understand what are the barriers to them returning those forms?
So it's been a difficult year. So before the 27% of last year, it was higher than that. So that's not always been quite that low, but it was around 50% return pre-COVID. So we're now in a position where we are able to get some feedback, but basically we would be just inundating carers with more emails to request why they haven't done it, sort of thing. So there has been follow-up, they have been sent the form again, social workers have been liaised with around it. So I think there isn't a really clear picture, but one of the nurses in the team had phoned some of the carers and had got them to complete it over the phone. And I think it is around, from what they said, and it's only a small number, it is around the pressures they've been under in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, which has made things very difficult. But I think that is what I'll be looking to do now that we've got a clearer picture, and I really am clear that this reporting is now very accurate. We can, as I say, work with the services around the foster carers to see how we can improve it and what the issues are. Because like you say, if we understand what the issues are, we're more able to improve the situation.
Thank you for that. The reason I ask is I know when I've received things that are given a deadline for when you have to get something back, you think, oh, I've got plenty of time. You put it to one side, and unless you get a reminder, you forget.
Yeah.
So I'm pleased to hear that you are going forward going to do some comeback on why things aren't returned.
Yeah, so there are reminders, but again, it's in the form of an email, and if you're really pressurized at home and things, then that can contribute to it. So I don't want to make an assumption it's all because of it's just another email in the box and people are pressurized. So moving forward, we will be able to explore that further and contribute improvements to that.
Thank you, Councillor Hay, and thank you, Catherine York. And I just wondered, Councillor Slatter.
I think you're expecting a question, aren't you? It may be better with the scorecards, or it may be better from Catherine because she is doing the work. It's entirely up to you.
The two sets of data are quite
created
in different ways. So I think we'll come on to the scorecard later. I just wanted to ask, from your point of view, Kevin, whether you have any input on that initial health assessment point.
I think where things have changed to virtual and with the pandemic, it has been quite a change for carers to manage all of the different meetings and children at home that they've had to do. I know when we've had the face-to-face assessments, often it's easier to fill out an SDQ while the nurse might be talking to the child. So that can make things a bit slicker. I think Catherine's probably right about the volume of emails and things that carers are getting, and possibly with a deadline, as Councillor Hay said, it can be missed. I also think from talking, just general feeling about the assessments and the SDQs, sometimes there isn't much in the way of feedback for carers from that. So I'm wondering if that's something that could be looked at, and maybe when Catherine talks with the service and maybe with myself and other carers, that we could think about how that maybe is fed back. I'm not sure, maybe carers, and I'm really just talking as a theoretical thing, maybe they're not aware of the importance of that and how that really sort of fits with the whole picture. So maybe sort of attending support groups or something as a speaker might be a useful thing. So I can take that back. I guess Ricky's probably writing a note of it now, but I'm meeting Ricky tomorrow, so we can maybe talk about that to help.
For those suggestions, that's helpful and nice to have the insight. I can't see any other questions. Oh, Councillor Boulat. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. On the questionnaire as well, I think it's noted here that there are 3 versions of the questionnaire, so also for the teacher and the self-report skills. So I was wondering if there's any data for that, because I can only see the one by sent to carers. And then also that there was a note about some children and young people with disabilities not receiving the questionnaire because it's not appropriate for this group. So I was wondering what is the alternative way for this group to provide feedback if the questionnaire is not appropriate for them? What are the alternative, more accessible ways that people can provide feedback in that group? Thank you.
Right. So who would you, Catherine? Do you want? Would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, that's fine. So first of all, the 3 types of questionnaire, the data is collated on the carer/parent questionnaire, and that is the national reporting requirement, and that is the one that we are looking at and collating on, because that is a requirement for every child, that is, bar the exceptions, that first, so from 4 years old up to 17 years old. So that's a requirement. So we collate that data. The education questionnaire and the self-questionnaire is dependent on circumstances around individual children. So we don't collate that as a cohort, but it would be recorded in the child's own individual record. So it's dependent on if they score 17 and above on the parent carer one, or there's some concerns, or the child has raised, issues, or they're not coping very well in certain areas that are reflected in the SDQ, then it would be undertaken. But that data isn't available as the number. It's about the individual child, so it's recorded on their record. And that would be available to the social worker, education colleagues, and the IRO, so they can then collate that and look at that as a whole. So we get a holistic approach to that. And the other question, sorry, I can't remember what the other question was. I should have gone with that first.
Sorry, it was alternate ways of feeding back if the questionnaire wasn't easy for the child to complete.
Yes, thank you for just reminding me. So that is around, if because the questions are around certain elements of a child's life and interactions and ability to understand caring and various things. So if a child's not able to do that, obviously there's always a holistic assessment of all children. So if a child isn't able or isn't suitable or appropriate for that, then the people around that child, so the carer, education, specialist nurses, social worker, will all be having that review of that child. So it might be in an educational health and care plan reviews and those sorts of situations. So there's always other opportunities. It's just about the appropriateness of the SDQ for a child or not.
Thank you. Is that okay? Okay, Councillor Slatter.
Yes, just quickly through you, Chair. Looking at the questionnaires, there's a degree of, would a child really want to fill it in if the foster carer is going to read it before passing it back? Having looked at them, they're quite personal, and they are asking children to say things that they may well deny. I've got grandchildren. And I just wonder, I don't think it's at all surprising that there's a bit of a shortfall on getting them back, to be honest, because I think they must be quite hard work. Maybe that's one for Kevin, but quite hard work for the carer to get the children to fill in. I'm glad to see there's lots of different languages, though. I'm sure Councillor Boulat's noticed that too.
So can I just respond to that?
Yes, do, Catherine. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The questionnaires are the same questions, but they're in a different format. So the one that we're reporting on is the one that the foster carer completes, and it's their view of how the child copes and manages in the situations and the questions described. The self one, which is the one that the young person can complete, is suitable for those that are 11 and above. And actually, it wouldn't go through the carer, it would go through an independent person. So usually the social worker would be responsible for that. So that shouldn't affect that. And interestingly enough, often a young person will have a lower score than the carer one because they see life differently and things sometimes they're similar, but that's how it would work.
That's reassuring. So that the self-assessment isn't seen by the foster carer, it goes to the social worker or the independent reviewing officer, did you say?
So the social worker would normally be the person that organises to undertake it, or health might do it with them. What I'm saying is it's independent, it's not the foster carer. And then it can be triaged. So health could triage the three assessments, but certainly the IRO would have oversight of them for the care reviews.
So the young person in care has some privacy in that, and so perhaps that's they're more likely to be forthcoming if they were concerned about any aspects of their foster care. So it's good. That's good that we need to know that. Thank you, Catherine. I think that's all the questions we've got from members. Thank you so much for your careful working through of that data, enabling us to understand it much more clearly. So thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, Kevin, have we asked you if you've got any thoughts on the health report?
No, but I was just thinking about the SDQs for the child, and not that I want to contradict, but I'm pretty sure that we, as a carer, I've received the carer one and the child one. What my comment was going to be, that I'll double check, but I think for the children, the added thing for children and young people to fill out another form is something we talked with Virtual School about as well, is that getting the child and young person's voice is really tricky sometimes, because they have all of these meetings, they have their stat visit with the social worker, they've got the pet review that they need to feed into, which is all beneficial for them, but they have so much, so actually asking them to fill out another form about themselves sometimes is a lot for them. So that could also, it's good that it's reported on separately, I think, for foster carers, and we can help hopefully to raise the bar on that one. But I'll catch up with you, Catherine, on that, and I'll check some emails and come back to you.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Right, members, so we've been asked to note and comment on the report, which I think we've done. So I think we'll move on, if you're all happy with that, to item 8, when we've got a report on children in care, not in education, employment or training. And we've got Kerry Seymour, the Children in Care Manager, who's going to introduce the report. I hope I can see Kerry's name on our screen, but are you there, Kerry?
Yes, I'm here. I'll put my video on now.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, Kerry, do go ahead.
So I'm just going to take just some parts of this report rather than going through the whole report, just the key areas. So Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, our main aim is, of course, to ensure that our children in care and care leavers are supported to have high aspirations, are able to access a range of opportunities, and are supported to remain in education or enter into training, apprenticeships or employment. So our social workers and PAs play a fundamental part in achieving this aim and work closely with our young people to achieve this goal. So in addition to this, as we discussed, as the report highlights, the council have also developed a written strategy document and an action plan that sets out what the council are wanting to achieve and how they will support the young person. So in 2020, a NEAT strategy was developed across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and that's led by Matt Oliver, with the aim of ensuring a coordinated response from all service delivery areas to support this work and improve performance across our vulnerable groups. And obviously children in care and care leavers come within that group. So alongside those reports submitted, we've also included the NEAT strategy, which I hope you've been able to also have a look at. So that's been formulated specifically for our children in care and care leavers. So as you will see, that the action plan is split into 4 focus areas, which are considered to be the strategic objectives. And then against each of these objectives are the service objectives. So this action plan is reviewed quarterly, and any relevant updates are shared at the strategic leads meeting, which is also chaired by Matt Oliver. So in terms of the data within the report, I've highlighted that in table 1, that our EAT figures for care leavers aged between 19 to 21 in Cambridgeshire. In 2020, this was showing at 44% in comparison to EAT figures for East of England and figures for East of England at 54%. For our Cambridgeshire statistical neighbours, the data indicates 54.1%. So this table shows that there's been improvements from 2017 for Cambridgeshire. However, as you'll see, there has been a 3% decrease between 2019 and 2020. And there are different reasons for this. For example, during this time, there was a change of our recording system, which has obviously impacted or has had an impact on the quality of the data available. However, we continue to work on this. And as you will see in our NEAT strategy, this is one of our strategic objectives. The impact of the pandemic has also had an impact of sectors of the employment market, which has therefore had an impact on our EAT figures for young people. So table 2 and 3 show the council's predicted figures for our 19 to 21-year-olds and our 16 to 17-year-olds. This shows an increase, as we would expect, as we move out of the pandemic and more opportunities become available. Our figures for young people in Cambridgeshire who are in learning have also increased, with more young people attending college or sixth forms. So at the moment, whilst we don't have the published data for 2021, the council data submission suggests that our overall EAT figures for 19 to 21 increases to 49.1%, which is a 5.1% increase. And the figures for our 17-year-olds to 18-year-olds has also risen to 61.3%. I think they were the key kind of areas that I just wanted to kind of pull from the report. So I don't know whether you've got any more questions, any questions?
Thank you very much. I wasn't quite sure if you'd finished.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, I just wanted to know whether you feel that the data that you're now being able to collect using this new system is actually helping you more, and whether that has been a change for the good, and whether that's settled in and that you're getting the data that you need now.
So at the moment, that is still work in progress. We have got some groups that we're meeting with to ensure that the data improves, and therefore we can have a better reflection of our data. So I would probably say it's not quite there, but we have got strategies in place to look at that and to try and resolve that.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter, would you like to?
Yes, Chair, through you. Apologies if I have missed it in the report, but I don't see any clear relationship with Cambridgeshire Skills, and yet that would seem to be something where the County Council is particularly involved and can help our young people get onto a good pathway. But I may well have missed it, in which case I apologise.
So I don't know whether that perhaps is, do you mean skills as in that we're to develop the young people's skills? Is that what you're, is that what you mean? Or
I think, do you want to go, Councillor Slatter?
It's Cambridgeshire Skills, which is the, I suppose you would call it the further education part of the County Council education input.
Yeah, so I don't actually think that that has been mentioned. That's not been mentioned in my report, and I don't think that actually is part of the strategy. We've obviously got a lot. If you see on one of the pages that we've kind of broken down the the work, the services that we're looking at to link in with our young people. So developing a construction project, working with the DWP around Kickstart and programs such as that. So we have those in place at this stage for our young people, post 16.
Thank you. I wondered, I believe we've got Mark Cowdell with us, who's the county-wide NEAT manager, who may wish to make a contribution. Hello, Mark. Nice to see you. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you. And I would just like to say that in answer to the previous question, we have been linking with Cambridgeshire Skills, although it's not entirely clear in the strategy plan. And we've been linking a lot with the combined authority and their skills strategy as well, because really to improve number of provisions, combined authority is definitely looking at that as part of their skills strategy.
Thank you, Mark. We lost you there briefly, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying. Any other questions, members? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so thank you very much indeed to Kerry for your report. And I suppose I just wondered, no, I'm going to leave that. I'll leave it for the time being, but thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much, Mark, for taking part as well. Really good to have you here. And good to know that you're linking up with the combined authority as well, because I know they have money, which helps. Okay, thank you. So I think we've, the recommendations asked that we note and comment on the report, which we've done. So thank you very much indeed to everybody for their contributions on that. So let us move on to item 9, which is the Corporate Parenting Performance Report, which is sponsored by Nicola and will be presented by Myra. And I will just say that we've got the Corporate Parenting Scorecard Performance Report, which is on pages 89, 90 and 91 really. We find that such a useful summary. And I remember when we first set this up and an officer said, well, I could give you information on A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I said, yes, please. A little bit of everything would be really, really useful. And so we find this extremely useful. Thank you very much indeed. So, so Myra, would you like to present the report, or is that Nicola? Did you want to say something first? No, okay, Myra, do go ahead then.
Good evening, council members. So I'm actually presenting a few reports this evening, but with an overall theme around performance. I'm going to take you to the first report, the purpose of which is to give you some information around placements and also, if I'm going to say to you, and some further detail in terms of placement types.
Myra,
you will see.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt you, could you just come a little bit closer to your microphone? You sounded very far away.
Oh, that's quite strange because I've actually got my earphones in as well. Can you hear me now?
Slightly better, thank you.
Oh, I do apologise.
No,
I'll do my best. So, what the purpose of the first report is to give you some information about placement types as well as the numbers of children that are actually in care. What this particular report does is that it gives you a breakdown of the types of placements. So the majority of our placements are for children that are actually in in-house foster placements, 244 out of 645. Following on from that, we have 207 children that are actually placed in independent fostering placements. And then equally, we have 77 young children that are placed in from the age of 16, in independent living. What that actually means in reality is they are living in properties where they are receiving additional support. So they're not actually living completely on their own, but there's a recognition of their age and their stage of development. It's part of their transition plan to develop them and getting them ready for adulthood at the age of 18. And that can actually be a range of different placement options within that. So some of that can be hostel type accommodation. Some of it can actually be them living in their own home, but with additional hours of support. We also have, it's obviously some children that are currently placed with prospective adoptive placements. And we also have children that are actually living with connected persons, as in an extension of their family. What you will also see is that we do have a number of children, 53 of those, that are currently placed in residential placements. That is higher than where I would probably have liked that to be at this point in the year, but that is a recognition, I think, of a theme that I think you've been hearing this evening, that in terms of COVID has had an impact in terms of placements, and it's actually had an impact in terms of these are some of our children that have really struggled at times in placements, and actually the change that they've experienced in terms of some occasions around schooling, around education, and around the fact that actually some of their foster carers have really struggled, not necessarily our in-house carers, but it has been some of our agency carers in terms of trying to balance the change for those children. And actually we did see earlier this year some real issues around fatigue of carers, which resulted in those children requiring residential placements. Have you got any questions for me at this point? I do just want to point out, we do have, I think you'll see the percentage at this moment in time, that we do have 52% of children are placed outside of Cambridgeshire boundaries. I think that links in a little bit with what Councillor Balat was asking earlier in terms of our unaccompanied asylum-seeking young children. But also, I will say that we do have children who are placed in other parts of the country because they are requiring more specialist placements at this time.
And I imagine some of our children or young people might be placed out of county for very good reasons to do with their own safety.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you. Members, are there questions based on the narrative report or on the scorecard? Did you want, sorry.
I'm going to come to the scorecard if you'd like me to do that. I just want to keep them.
So let's deal with the narrative first then. Any questions on that, members? Doesn't look as though there are. So would you like to move?
All right, I'll move us on to the scorecard. Yeah. Okay, so just take myself. So again, what I'm actually going to do here is just go over some of the more highlight points. I will raise with you actually, and I'm sure, maybe not to necessarily preempt a question, but we have seen a decline in our performance around statutory visits to children. I would like to offer some narrative around the particular performance data there. That actually is multifaceted in terms of that. We have moved to face-to-face visiting to our children in care. However, we do still have some residual issues where placements, and I'm saying whether residential or foster placements, have actually still have tested positive, and they've actually requested that we undertake those visits virtually. They therefore are not captured in this data because actually this data very much captures face-to-face visiting. We also have had some staffing issues which are ongoing, which have impacted on social workers' caseloads, and that has then had an impact on recording. Those visits are being undertaken because if you actually look at the data above that, which is 99% in terms of childcare reviews, we have the checks and balances of the IRO service who will check that actually statutory visits have been undertaken and that children have been seen alone. IROs also, within their childcare reviews, will actually check with the child prior to the review, has the child seen their social worker, and they will also check that with the foster carer. So they will triangulate the information that the social worker is giving, and they will also check the file too in terms of that. The other area that's actually impacting on the statutory visiting performance data at the moment is that we moved to Liquid Logic just about a year ago, just over a year ago. However, what we are seeing is that there are some significant issues emerging regarding the workflow within that system that is actually preventing the closure of a number of placement types. So one is adoption and the other is our over 18s. That is what I'm currently addressing with our Liquid Logic colleagues, and that is also then impacting on the statutory visiting data, because it is recording that actually we haven't seen a child that is adopted, quite rightly, but it's recording that we should have seen that child when there is actually no need. And that is actually what's making that particular performance indicator look lower than the reality. In addition to that, and Nicola knows very much so that on a weekly basis, she receives a report from my service in terms of the statutory visits, and she monitors that quite closely, as do I. And as I've just said earlier, we also have the checks and balances from the IRO service. I would actually say that performance indicator is actually higher. However, it's not been borne out by this performance data because of the way in which it's reported at this time. The other data that I'd like to bring you to, which has been one of our priority areas this year, has actually been about placement stability. So you will see that actually we are currently at 10%, 10.1%. Again, that isn't quite where I would like that to be, but that is actually better than where it's better than, no, it's not better. It isn't where I want us to be, but actually what I have seen and what I have been working on is we've started to stabilize that particular performance indicator. So I think, as I said to you earlier this year, we had a number of placement breakdowns due to a range of factors, with an underlying cause of COVID and carers being fatigued, and also children's behaviours being quite challenging within that context. We've put a lot of work into placements, either offering additional commission services to intervene early. I've also re-looked at the way in which we were working with fostering, and particularly our foster carers, and how we could support them better by intervening much earlier and using more preventative, proactive strategies. That at this latter point in the year is beginning to pay some real dividends. And we have seen a real slowing up of placement moves for children. There will always be placement moves because children quite rightly should move on to their adoptive placement, and they will also move in readiness to actually leave our care. But in terms of placement breakdowns, the immediacies of that has actually slowed up quite significantly in the last 3 months. I'm just having a look equally. So I think the area that I would like to highlight as well, and I think it was, it was an area that Catherine York mentioned earlier, that actually children in care whose annual health assessments were completed on time is 92.5%. That, although is, and it very much tallies with what Catherine actually talked about within the cohort of about 85 to, I think it was 81 to 95%. We're sitting, our recording mirrors that, which I think is very positive. Catherine and her health teams, as well as actually corporate parenting, now meet on a monthly basis. During COVID, we were meeting on a weekly basis, and we have developed quite close working in terms of addressing key areas such as initial health assessments, annual health assessments, the dental performance information that you see here. We have developed a joint health and social care work stream plan. And that includes our designated doctors in terms of paediatricians. And from my perspective, we are, I think, working extremely hard and very well collaboratively to address issues that we have both got a joint interest in. Do you have any questions for me at this point?
Yes, and I'm going to take your last point first, if I may,
okay.
Myra. Two things. One is the children in care whose initial health assessment was completed on time. This seems either really a very low success rate at 21.6, or perhaps there's an unreasonable target. So I'd like a little bit more explanation of that. I appreciate pandemic will have affected that to some degree, but I'm just wondering, interestingly, in this particular case, I think the target is absolutely right. We should be trying to see as many of these children getting their initial health assessment done on time. But whereas in some other circumstances, one wonders whether the target is a little high. But I'm really encouraged about the annual health assessments being completed on time, but I am quite worried about this initial health assessment. And what does that come down to? Is it because the children are at distance, or is it that doctors aren't having appointments, or is it that the young people don't have to go, or what's feeding into that?
So first of all, I will say to you is I agree with you, the target is the right target. Okay, so I don't think it's overly ambitious. I think it's the right target. We have actually, myself and Catherine have interrogated, and Nicola have interrogated that particular data. And what we looked at, particularly Catherine and I, is that there are a number of issues that have been impacting on that. So one was actually there is an issue in terms of children placed out of area, and the other areas being proactive in undertaking those assessments within the 20 days. I think, as you heard earlier from Catherine, that Cambridgeshire and Peterborough have a reciprocal arrangement. So if a Cambridgeshire child placed in Peterborough, they will automatically do that and give that priority, and vice versa. That isn't always the case actually in out of areas. And there are backlogs, and there isn't, as I say, that reciprocal arrangement. The second issue that has also impacted on this has also been that there's been a lack of understanding in our family safeguarding teams, particularly in Cambridgeshire, around the process. And so some work has been done with those teams directly, with the service managers and the head of service, to address that. So what you should see, I would say, going forward, is an improvement in that. But we recognised that we needed to meet with family safeguarding because there was some confusion about the system, and that actually that has what we've really needed to focus on. So hopefully that should answer that does answer that particular question.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to leave it to others to ask any questions. So, Councillor Boulat.
Thank you, Chair. I also had some questions on the health data. So one was covered by you, Chair, already, but I was wondering on that as well, like what was the difference between the Q1 and Q2, because the Q1 is actually significantly...
Which data are you referring to?
The health service standards. So the one that you mentioned, Chair, about the initial health assessment, I was just wondering what was the difference between the first quarter and the second, because actually it's much higher in the first quarter of 2021, 2022 than the second one. So I was wondering if there was any kind of significant difference, just my kind of question on the data. But on the dental examination, I wanted to ask, because I was thinking about this, and I think there's good progress being done compared to the last time we discussed this in the last committee. But I was actually wondering if there is some reluctance amongst children, because in general there is some reluctance amongst children to go to the dentist, and I was wondering if there's any anecdotal evidence that because there was this interruption in appointments or delays in appointments because of the pandemic, whether that means that it's actually harder now to get children into this routine of having the regular appointments now that you have this break. So I was wondering if there's any kind of more qualitative evidence on what could justify that. But yeah, my questions are mainly on the data. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll answer the dental data first. So in terms of that, in terms of of COVID, what my health colleagues did was ensured that those children, in terms of their annual health assessments, they also incorporated conversations about dental. So what they've done then is actually probably why that performance data is showing an improvement. Those children who actually, because we knew that dentists were closed for a period of time. In addition to that, there is an issue in Cambridgeshire in terms of NHS dentists. However, if a child is actually needing dental treatment, actually the LAC Health team have actually been able to be resourceful and get they have got a dentist surgery in Ely that had actually been taking NHS place children and also children in care. And that, I think, so that combination of that oversight of the annual health assessment, dealing with that as a screening exercise, as well as then signposting children to more targeted dentists who are taking them, I think is why we've seen that improvement there. In terms of, you're absolutely right, and I don't think I quite picked that up, Councillor Bellat, that actually what we saw in terms of Q1 was actually an improvement. My understanding is that there has been a change in the system in terms of from health around actually ensuring that we have consent of the young person, consent, and the referral process was being completed. There has been a dip. Obviously you can see that from the data, but it still is, from my point of view, we have had a lot more children that have actually, obviously you can see the 53 children placed in residential. They aren't necessarily going to be in the Cambridgeshire area, they are going to be in other parts of the country, and that equally may well have had, as I said earlier, an impact in terms of those local health trusts undertaking those initial health assessments.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Bradnam, may I jump in a moment, please?
Yes, do, Catherine, do go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say I think there's a little bit of work that Myra and I might need to pick up here about the different data that we're presenting, because I've already presented on initial health assessments and the data is much more positive. So I think we maybe need to pick that up because it's not representing 21.6%. So I think maybe in time for the next committee, we need to have worked a bit more closely about that data.
Yes, and indeed, thank you, Catherine, for pointing that out. In fact, I made that point when we were discussing prior to the beginning of the committee, and it was noted that these two sets of data are gathered in slightly different ways and in different time frames, I believe. So I think that would be helpful if we could, if you could work towards bringing something together that ties that up a bit more tightly. And I'll leave. I'm sure you're very capable of working out how to do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Slatter, did you have any questions? No? Okay. So I just wondered, Kevin Arrowsmith, did you have any thoughts on this?
Sorry, I was just making a note then about the dentist in Ely.
Who I think, of my understanding, Kevin, just so that I just get this absolutely, the hot off the press information is I think they've now decided they can't take any more. That was what I heard this week. But Catherine and I will come back to you if there's any change on that. Okay.
No, that's fine. I don't think there really was anything. I had picked up the difference in the percentage on the initial health assessment, and I guess, yeah, that would be interesting. I don't think so far on anything that you've gone through. I think you've got other bits to go through, have you, Myra? Yeah,
I have.
I've got a couple of notes, but I don't think it's fair to bring them up now because I don't think you've discussed them yet.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, that's fine. All right, are people okay with me then moving on to the next agenda item?
Just one other thing, Myra, and that was under the adoption data, we've been given information in percentages, with target being above 17%. But I just wondered if another time when we present this, could we have the numbers?
Yes,
because
I think I like
numbers. It could be 17% of 2 or 20 or 50 or something.
Okay, I will certainly bear that in mind for the next meeting because I'm a bit like you. I prefer it in real-time data.
Thank you very much. Lovely. Okay, then. So if everybody's happy with that, we've all asked the questions that we want and we've noted the report. Thank you very much indeed, Myra, for that. And do you want to move on to the annual report? Then?
I do.
Item 10 on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay. So I've already talked earlier. So this particular meeting this particular agenda item sets out actually a review of the last 12 months and what our priorities have actually been. I'm not going to go back over statutory visits because I think I've done that in the previous agenda item, but I'm more than happy to take any further questions from this report. We also in this report have a focus around missings, again, health that was actually mentioned earlier, and particularly placement stability. So I will say to you, in terms of, I think I've already said, we've really developed quite a much stronger way of working with health colleagues. And I would say, and I think Catherine would echo it, a much stronger partnership arrangement at an operational and strategic level. We now meet monthly. Catherine and I met earlier on today with a range of other health colleagues. And actually, as part of that meeting, for example, today, the lead clinician came and joined us. We discuss key issues such as new guidance that's actually coming out. So for today, we actually talked about the NICE guidance around young people and mental health. We actually look at that in terms of gaps in service delivery, how we can actually address that collectively. And we will actually set ourselves work and actual goals and deadlines to achieve. I actually see that impact over time is making a difference in terms of placement stability, which has been the other priority over the last 12 months. What we have actually been doing in corporate parenting is actually learning from those placement breakdowns or moves, and actually learning from the outcomes in terms of that, either from actually the reviews, because our IRO service actually provides us a learning report, and we take that back into the service and we look at the recommendations from that to actually build that into our operational service delivery. What we have been doing is, and I think I said this briefly earlier, is really focusing on how we can support and help our foster carers in particular, and our children in terms of maintaining those placements safely, successfully and sustainably. That has, I think, been a real shift and focus in my service from, I think, what I saw earlier in the year, a more reactive approach operationally, to being much more proactive, nipping things in the bud, addressing those and bringing in services where required quickly and swiftly to support placements. That equally is an addition to actually working with the fostering service, who will alert us quite quickly, and we work collaboratively with our fostering colleagues, and also the RAP service, which is actually very much about putting in support strategies into placements. The other issue for me in terms of, we have had, obviously, I think I said earlier, some impact around COVID, but I think COVID has also given us some opportunities to be creative. So in other words, what we've been able to do where appropriately is offer some virtual support, be more flexible in that. That does not take away from our statutory visiting, but what it has enabled is that some of our young people have actually been much more willing to engage in a more virtual way than it has been in terms of face-to-face. So those have been our particular areas. Have you got any questions for me on the annual report? It does give you an overview in terms of gender and some demographics, and I'm happy to answer some questions around that as well.
Thank you, Myra. And I just wanted to alert members to the fact that I have been slow in working with Myra to produce the forward to this report, which you'll appreciate is something that we should have in there, and it will be in there shortly. I have one question, and that is, yes, around, it's on page 106 of our agenda. I'm not sure what page it is in the report, but it's always worrying to see children in care at risk of sexual exploitation, and particularly that girls who are children in care are at risk between the age 13 and 16. It's on page 106. And I just have written the word worrying over that column on the histogram. And I just wondered what we're doing to try and
so if I maybe explain that data a little bit.
Yeah,
so the reason that looks the way it does is because that social workers are expected to undertake a CSE and CCE risk assessment. Okay, so the data has been pulled in terms of that assessment. Now, what this data doesn't tell you is actually how we've graded that risk. So I couldn't tell you this evening how many are actually graded as high, medium, or low. Okay, so you've just got an overall figure within that. I would say to you, within that, we have a small cohort that will be high, and we have monitoring systems in place for all of our children, but particularly those that are high. I have a colleague called Jenny Goods. She actually chairs the MACE meeting, which is the multi-agency criminal exploitation meeting, which includes CSE and includes CCE. And that is a partnership meeting that includes the police, that includes ourselves. It also, I think, Nicola, you may know better than me. I'm not sure, because I don't sit on that panel, who else would sit there. But I get the minutes of that meeting, I review those, and I expect that my staff share meetings and information in that meeting, and they will also work on the recommendations from that meeting. If there are additional supports that are required, then actually those will then be brought back and reviewed and implemented where needed. We also have the overview of the independent reviewing service, who are our additional monitoring to ensure that we are implementing those recommendations, as well as actually regular supervision in terms of the team manager and the social worker reviewing the actions from the MACE meeting and from the childcare review. So I get why you're worried, but we do have robust systems in place around that.
Thank you. I didn't doubt that you wouldn't. If you see what I mean. I was sure
I know,
you
but
would.
I think maybe next time when we do this data, is if we broke down a little more, gave you some more nuanced information about how many are high and medium, because then that may allay some of your worries.
Mm-hmm. I think it comes along also that we know, don't we, children in care who are missing on the previous page. This can be a small number of children who go missing a lot, and so I guess I'm nervous for those children who might be at risk. I just wondered also, Myra, on that missing incidents and missing children, with this, where the number is high, I wondered if you have a record of whether these children are actually trying to get back to their birth parents, or if they're just trying to get away somewhere else.
It can absolutely be a combination of a range of things. So every child that actually goes missing is offered a return interview. Some decline that, most don't. And again, the information is discussed within the case supervision between the team manager and the social worker to ensure, is there anything that we've missed, anything that we need to identify, that when the social worker goes out to do their statutory visit, and also how that should be informing the care plan. Sometimes it can be children because they're unhappy with their placement. Actually, yes, it can be children wanting to return home, or actually it's exploitation, or again, what this data doesn't quite tell you, that there is a requirement for the placement when a child does not return home on time for that placement to inform the police the young person is missing. However, so we can actually have a situation of some young people going missing for 20 minutes or over 24 hours. So it gives you, there is that whole combination. We review each of those carefully. And I will give you an example. We have a young person who has had a multiple of missing episodes, and there is actually an additional multi-agency meeting that I'm chairing around that young person, working with the police, the placement, as well as, Catherine has been in that particular meeting, as well as social care staff, to keep reviewing what the actual plan is and actually learning from each of those episodes.
That's very reassuring. Thank you very much. Members, any other questions? No, doesn't look like it. Okay, so thank you very much indeed. Kevin, did you want to ask anything on the basis of Myra's report?
I don't think I wanted to ask anything. I want to say that the information in here I think is really useful for foster carers as well, and that I think it would be really beneficial to be working closer with Myra for foster carers and the fostering service, because so much of this information, not that it's interesting, but I think it's useful for foster carers, to know, how many placements were maybe given to IFAs because we didn't have capacity or for whatever reason, and if there's been placement breakdowns, maybe what the reasoning was and what's been, so as a foster carer we can see the two services working closer together and learning from each other, and so the information's there. So I was kind of reading through thinking this is it's really good information and I think we can use it better, so I really look forward to that.
Thank you very much. Great. So we are asked to note the content of the report and raise any questions, and I think we've done that too. So thank you very much. And we're now coming on to the workshop and training plan, which is item 11. Is this the one, Rashenda, that we had updated? No, that was the action log, wasn't it? I was slightly surprised that this didn't seem to record that anybody had attended in July, and I'm sure members did. I have a funny feeling I was not able to attend, but I believe that just needs to be updated. This is on page 115 of our agenda. I wondered if Rhiannon would have kept a record of the members and whether we would see this in another meeting.
Is this the safeguarding training or the?
Well, it's just that the plan refers to training that was in July for example, member induction program, briefing new members, and it refers to attendance, and it's blank. And I just wondered how many of the members had managed to attend that. Yeah, sorry, Rishenda, do thank you. Sorry.
Yes, Chair, you're absolutely right, and we will get that updated.
Thank you very much indeed. And there was also training on safeguarding in the member induction programme. And I think, Councillor Slatter, you wanted to ask something about?
Well, I think that I hope I may be the only councillor who's found that there's some of the induction went over my head or around the side of my head, and there are questions I would like to ask, certainly in the question of safeguarding. I mean, I also belong to under Arts and Health Committee, and it would just be very useful, perhaps without overloading the officers, if there was a later version from the, we have beginners, intermediate, and advanced in further education. Well, I think I'm intermediate now. And it could be shared across the directorate, perhaps, or across the whole council. I think we all get casework that is associated in one way or another with safeguarding of all types. And it would be helpful to have the training. Thank you. But obviously, it's very useful to know that our foster carers are supported when this sort of thing happens.
Thank you, Councillor Slatter. And I would like to have some training also. I know those of us who've been on the subcommittee for some time have had this in the past, but if it was possible to have any training on county lines and sexual exploitation, I think that would be very helpful so that we can understand the risks that our children in care are subject to from that source, if we feel they're more at risk than children otherwise. That would be helpful. Do you think that might be possible?
I'm sure it will be. We have been working. Oh, sorry, it's a bit loud, suddenly. We have been working on a training schedule for members linked to CYP committee as well, because obviously there are some significant overlaps. So there is also another training that's happened that's not on this report at all, which I think was the one you gave your apologies to. So we'll add that in, but we'll also have a look at, and I don't know, I think it's perhaps with between us and Rashendra at the minute in terms of trying to work some dates and things with the other subjects, but we've tried to capture what everybody has said they want, but we can add that in and have a think about how to present that for you. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, we'll take the training plan as noted, and then the final agenda item is the subcommittee agenda plan, which, as I said, that's we're on pages 117 onwards. Yeah, sure. Do you want to turn your microphone on? Sorry.
I had. Before we move on, at the bottom of page 115, it says members are asked to review the training sessions below which were requested previously by the subcommittee and confirm whether these are required and prioritise them if so. Is it at this point we should be doing that?
You're looking at the ones on 1 and 2 on page 116, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for drawing. Yeah, I'd overlooked that. But do you want to make a start on that? Do you want to make a comment?
I believe both these areas deserve us looking at them, and I think they were suggestions put forward by the previous corporate parenting committee.
Right. That's right, they were. And can we just ask that we bring those forward into your thinking, Nicola, for training?
Yeah, we're very happy to do so. I think we have tried to give a lot more information about the care leavers offer and young people, and I think there's a lot more that has been shared with the committee already, but we can have a look at that. What I might suggest is, I think the specialist support services RAPs, which I think Myra had mentioned earlier. So what I think Ricky, that's so loud, sorry. What I think Ricky and I'll do is go away and have a look, because it's actually managed under the same bit as the supervised contact service. So we can maybe bring all of that together and have a look at that. I'm just conscious there is quite a long list already, so there's only going to be so many we can fit in for you, but absolutely we can perhaps say this is the list, what are your priorities, you know. And I think just for the record, perhaps to say the last one was on fostering, particularly, and also being a corporate parent, and I think was very well received. It was a very good presentation. I take no credit, I just stood in for Ricky, but I think it gave a lot of information, so we can perhaps try and work on those lines for other ones. But yes, absolutely.
Okay, so thank you. So moving on then to the agenda plan, we've had our meeting today. At the next meeting, well, just one thing I wanted to kind of, I'm just slightly concerned about whether our theming means that we only look at, as it were, education once in a public meeting and health once in a public meeting, and then what's the other thing that we did early on? Participation, wasn't it? But you know, I'm just wondering whether that does actually work the way we hoped it would. The principle being to have a first meeting with the young people in an informal meeting where we could raise the issues and then bring those forward to a public meeting. I just wondered, Nicola, whether you could talk to that, please.
So I think that we haven't been able to run it through quite in the original way, partly because of our meetings. Some of our meetings actually didn't happen at all, did they, during COVID? And then when they were virtual with the young people, it was a bit more challenging. I suppose my view would be that we probably need to try and run a cycle through. We do bring information about other areas to different meetings. For example, we've had quite a long chat about health issues today, and this is actually an education meeting, so it's not an absolute ban. You can't have other reports, and we would always bring urgent and important items to committee. We also do have the briefing note process. So if there is anything that subcommittee members think or becomes more urgent in between committees, we can do additional reports for you and circulate those. So I think it does work, but I think we haven't had a chance really to work it through. I think the bit that is actually clearly really starting to come together, and I was really pleased with the last informal meeting, I have to say. So it's got a way to go, but I think from where we were, it's a massive improvement, and that's down to you as a subcommittee, I think. But we need to continue to work on that, and I think the length of time we decided that meeting would be, the way we managed that actually worked really well, from a personal opinion. So I think we probably just need to try and hone that, and perhaps look at, once you're having your regular meetings, we can have a look at how that works and what other reports might need to go forward. But that would be my suggestion. But obviously it's for the committee in the end to say what they would like.
Thank you, Nicola. I think it's when you just look at the agenda plan like that, my feeling is, oh gosh, we can't look at health just once a year, but we do get the scorecard, don't we, every time? So at least that gives us an opportunity to bring up issues that might be of concern, and it puts a place in our agenda where we can do a deeper exploration of some of these issues. So members, I don't know if you had any concerns along those lines yourself at all about that, the phasing of the discussion on, I'm now trying to remember what the third theme was. Is it placement? That's it, sorry, thank you. And I hope you feel that that is a useful way of doing it, that we've got these times when we look at it in detail, but we can always bring matters to the subcommittee in between times. So thank you. I notice on the, I think, was it Shanda, did you raise with me this adjustment? Some of the things that had been, we were going to say in the January meeting, I can't remember where it was, but we said that we would bring into the January meeting children in care, was it with the participation? We were thinking we needed to bring the, oh, I know what it was, progress with the initial health assessments and dental care. Can we have a report back on that at our January meeting? On the basis of the discussions that were going to go on between Myra and Catherine.
So we can put that in. So you see, this because it is quite broad, so we can put it into the performance reporting, so we can just slot it into that and come back to you specifically on health assessments and dental, and perhaps there's some recommendations about what the committee might want to think about in relation to the dental offer, which is, I think, the root of the problem with the dental figures.
No pun intended.
Yeah, oh gosh, yes, sorry, yes.
Have us all wincing. Okay, thank you very much. So we can bring those in under the performance reporting. Great, lovely. Okay, so members, I think we're there. Unless there's anything anybody else wanted to raise. Okay, so that brings us today to the end of today's business. Thank you, and we're 6:15. That's great. Thank you to everyone for attending. Our next public meeting will be on Wednesday, the 23rd of March. I particularly wanted to thank the officers for taking part. Obviously you would, but thank you very much for your contributions, and thank you very much to the chair of the Cambridgeshire Foster Carers Association, Kevin, for your useful insights from a foster carer's point of view. So members, thank you so much, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you.